Hour 7 is a favorite of mine. The reading of Hour 7 will take you a long time, much longer than the other hours, but you'll see why it's worth it. And even though it's a long read, I think in many ways it's an easier read, even though there are now different challenges. The big new challenge is that you will be reading not just texts, but also images. So what we have here is a synergism of text and image. And by text, of course, all I mean is words that are put together in the verbal art. I'm not necessarily talking about something that's written. In fact, I insist that this is something that is performed. And when it comes to image, I just want you to make sure that you don't start thinking of the image as based on the text. The image has its own life, and the text and the image together have lives of their own that can interweave with each other, but still remain independent of each other. So, the three big texts that we'll be looking at in Hour 7 are A, B, and C. A is a set of instructions given by an old man to a young man about how to drive a chariot successfully in a chariot race. But the takeaway is not only how to win in a chariot race, but how to live life. And a very important word that will figure in text A is sema, and I want to go back to that in a minute. But let's go to text B. What is it? It's a description of a chariot race that was customarily held in Athens on the feast day of Our Lady of Athens, so to speak. That's Athena. This chariot race happened every year, and it involved a reenactment of chariot fighting. So chariot racing as a reenactment of chariot fighting in the heroic past. Text C is a description of a moment in the heroic career of Achilles when he jumps off his speeding chariot and lunges at his mortal enemy. In another epic tradition, the mortal enemy is called Memnon. So those are the three primary texts we will be reading closely, A, B, and C. But you can add to that D, E, F, which are descriptions of how Hector jumps off a speeding chariot from the platform of the speeding chariot. And then G, which is a picture of Patroclus, the mortal enemy of Hector, and vice versa, who is in his own turn jumping off a speeding chariot. And there's a collision course in the making, because just as in F, Hector is jumping off his chariot and ready to kill Patroclus, in G, Patroclus is jumping off his chariot and ready to kill Hector. Having told you what the main points of interest are when it comes to reading texts in Hour 7, let me turn to the reading of images in Hour 7. These are parallel exercises, and you'll find that reading images will help you read text, just as reading text will help you read images. In the case of the images, the two big ones are image A1 and image B1. And these are the main pictures painted on vessels, vases. The technical word for these vases is hydria. And the first one is in the museum at Münster. The second one is in the Boston Museum of Fine Arts. And both of these main images, A1 and B1, show various aspects of chariot driving and chariot fighting, except that in these pictures you see not only the world of myth, the world of Achilles and Hector, but also the world of ritual as it is ongoing in late 6th century Athens. And the ritual that we're dealing with here is the ritual of athletics, We moderns tend not to think of athletics as ritual, but in the ancient Greek world, that's exactly what athletics were, including chariot racing, including the complex form of chariot racing that the ancient Greeks referred to as the event of the Apobatēs, or Apobatēs. And Apobatēs means he who gets off. And in this particular form of athletics, in this particular form of chariot racing, the idea was that the athlete who was costumed as a warrior, wearing full armor, this athlete who was on the platform of the chariot, left-hand side, was supposed to jump off this chariot as it was racing along, full speed, armor and all, and I like to say it this way, he was supposed to jump off and hit the ground running, because if you jump off a racing chariot, it's a very dangerous thing, and if you don't run when you jump off, you're going to be injured in a very bad way. So that's the climactic moment of this particular kind of chariot race. It's not like the chariot racing that we're familiar with, where only a driver is involved. In this kind of chariot racing, there's both a driver and a rider, and it's the rider who is costumed as a warrior, actually wearing the armor of a contemporary warrior. It is this left-hand figure who does the jumping off. He is the Apobatēs, the one who gets off. And in text C, we actually see a description of the moment, the dangerous moment when an athlete, in this case, the date for this event is the 4th century, so it's a later date than what we are usually looking at. You actually see the moment where the athlete jumps off. And we even know such details when we look at the evidence of the Parthenon marbles, that the person who jumps off grabs the railing of the chariot, even though he's on the left-hand side of the chariot, with his right hand, and then eases himself back until he suddenly jumps off. And Camilla has a wonderful shot of a piece of sculpture that actually shows this event. So let me talk a little bit about A1 and B1 and how the world of myth and the world of ritual come together in a very interesting way. It's certainly not the kind of thing we see in the Homeric Iliad when we think of chariot racing as described in Iliad 23. And in these moments that we see painted by the painters of the vases in image A1 and B1, the person who is jumping off the chariot and running alongside the chariot is not just an athlete, he's also a hero. And not just any hero, he's Achilles, the number one hero of the Iliad. And you can't call these pictures based on the Iliad because they have an independent tradition that informs them related to the verbal art of the Iliad, but the visual arts here are definitely different from the verbal art in how this moment is represented. And try to imagine a moment where Achilles himself is the athlete. But if he's an athlete, he's not doing it right, because what happens when we look at B1, picture B1, we see that the chariot of Achilles is dragging the corpse of Hector. And that is something that is morally negative. The verbal art of Homeric poetry does not pretend that what Achilles does is all right for his life and times. It is not. The Homeric audience, however we define that audience, is supposed to be morally shocked at the idea of an athletic event being corrupted by attaching the corpse of one's deadliest enemy to the back of a chariot and dragging a corpse behind it while you're engaging in an athletic activity. That's not athletics the way the ritual athletics of Athens in the late 6th century would work. And we come to the paradox that is beautifully formulated by Walter Burkert, where you have catastrophe in myth, but regularity in ritual. And in the Athenian athletic event of the Apobatēs, there's no dragging of corpses behind speeding chariots. That's just something that happens in myth, which corrupts the ritual, and which means that for the rest of time, we humans have to do it right. One of many instances where, although heroes are the prototypes for ritual, they manage to do it wrong, and do it wrong big time. And that is why we humans have to keep on redoing it the right way for all eternity. Every time the right time happens, the right season, we engage in festivals, we engage in competitions, we engage in athletics, and in those moments, let's take the case of chariot racing, we do it right where Achilles did it colossally wrong. And in image C, you have a very good representation of how something is wrong with the dragging of the corpse of Hector. And you see that something is wrong because it's not even included in the main frame of the picture. It's off to the side. It's almost as if what is happening to the corpse of Hector is marginalized. Lucky thing, isn't it? And we're told this in the Iliad, that the body of Hector is not disfigured by this brutal act of dragging his body behind a speeding chariot. Why is it not disfigured? Well, according to the Iliadic narrative, it's because Apollo himself, the god, constantly anoints the body with nectar, which means that instead of the intended disfiguring of the corpse, imagine how a body would be skinned and mutilated in general by being dragged behind a chariot. Instead of that happening, the body remains intact. It's painted as a beautiful body. The French, being the French, have to have a word for this, and they call it le beau mort, the beautiful corpse, in opposition to the more conventional way of saying la belle mort, which is the beautiful death. So in ancient Greek myth-making, you not only have the beautiful corpse, you have the beautiful death. So all of these images, and I collected roughly 20 of them, are variations on the theme of engaging in athletics, and when it's done in the present, then it's correct. It's ritually correct. When it's done in the past, in the world of heroes, there's something off about it. And what that thing is that is not right is the morally repugnant deed of Achilles, where he's so angry at his enemy that he wants to disfigure him even in death. And of course doesn't succeed, but the intent is there. So to wind up, my idea in putting together both text and image in studying the activities of heroes and the activities of athletes, the first case in the heroic age, in the second case in the here and now of ritual, my purpose has been to show how myth is something that is always pertinent to the life of the here and now. And that's the beauty of the combination of myth and ritual. Myth and ritual are regularly two sides of the same coin. You can't really understand myth if you don't understand the ritual that goes with it, and vice versa. And in this hour, even though it's the longest hour and will take you a longer time to read, I think your effort will be repaid because you will start seeing clearly how myth really is relevant to the present. That is to say, the present of those for whom the myth is being made and by whom the myth is being made.